back to another episode of Condition for Success. We're here with Kimberly Brenner, and I know we always talk about mindset of a millionaire. Here we're diving in a little different ways of talking about the relationships, the love, and if you're one of those millionaires or want to be millionaires, on how do you create relationships and proper ones, healthy ones. Kimberly's going to help us with that. So, Kimberly, thank you for being out today, and I'll let you share all your resume.
Well, I have a feeling that we're going to have fun with this conversation because I talk about the married mindset. You talk about a millionaire mindset, but we're missing the married mindset. When I went to high school a long time ago, women were the girls, not women. The girls were taught how to take care of the house. We had home economics. It was the whole focus was on that. And when I graduated, I would say a third of the girls that graduated actually had an engagement ring. So imagine going straight from high school right into being married, but they were prepared for it. And I was raised by my grandparents, and they had a married mindset. Their parents taught the boys, this is what it means to be married. This is what you do, what you don't do. This is what the woman does. Now, today, all of that's got thrown out the window. Okay. So women are like, you're not going to put me in, like I could go work. I don't have to stay home. There is no template like they had about 100 years ago. So now communication is so much more important, and knowing yourself is so much more important as to how do I want my marriage to look like? What's my married mindset? And every couple's going to be different, just the same as the millionaire mindset. You can make your million in a different way than somebody like Edison who made his million. We have our own path as to that story within us, that wisdom within us. Like, what are we here to do? And so you put 10 millionaires in a room and they all make their money differently. I can put 10 couples in a room and they're all going to make their marriage work differently.
Now,
But
how
there
did you
are,
get into this? How did you get into counseling and the
uh,
mindset of marriages?
oh, good question. Well, first of all, I always knew that I was the one who kept the family together. That was my job in my family. Being raised by the grandparents, I saw saw all of my aunts and uncles fighting and not getting along. And I'm like, why? And I also wondered, why do people say they love you and then hurt you? Because that was my experience. I love you, but then I do something that really messes you up. Like, what's that about? Why are we off track? Um, and that started, I think, when I was probably 13. That question, why do people do what they do? Especially when it comes to love. So I always end up my statements with remember to be love, just to be it, to care for another person. But we live in the world of judgment. We live in the world of criticism. And so that kills love. So if a person criticizes, blames, or judges another person, they end up not liking them. And when they not like them, they stop any warm, fuzzy feelings towards them. So how did I get started? I'm a firm believer in love. I used to follow Leo Piscaglia. I don't know if you know who he is. So
Yeah.
he was the first professor many, many years ago that actually had a class called Love 101. And it was the most more students enrolled in his class than any other class. And he would have the students go on campus with signs saying hug me or free hugs. So it was very revolutionary back then. And he believed that you needed 12 hugs a day. So he would make the students go on campus and at least give and get 12 hugs. And it changed the campus. People were happier, people were friendlier, people were more generous with caring about each other. So he was onto something. He was onto something.
Well, now I'm a fan of the Beatles, so I know the "All You Need Is Love." So I'm curious, since with if hugs and social interactions are so vital for us to be happier and everything, Do you find that we're in a bit of a rut still because of COVID and and the lockdown, and that we weren't able to hug or express love in physical form to so much of our family and friends during that time?
I think it started before COVID. What if COVID was the result of the fact that we stopped connecting?
So where do you think it started with the disconnect?
We went into a period of time about it's all about me. So I want you to think about the time of the Vietnam War and the upheaval and the going away from caring.
So we're going all the way
And
back to this isn't 21st century. We're going back to 60s, 70s.
yes, absolutely. The 60s and the 70s were a very difficult time, a lot of questioning. Betty Friedan talking about the undefined problem or the unnamed problem that women were having. The imbalance between men and women was occurring. It was all about the me generation. The me generation. What about me? Am I happy? Okay. And so they went out seeking their own personal happiness. I can do whatever I want to do. And we got away from, I think what you talked about earlier was the us, that connection. What about us building something together? Okay. That wasn't the case back in the 60s and the 70s. So we moved into this
Independent
yes.
driving role.
Yes, exactly. You know, um, they talked about the man, we don't follow the man. Um, Staying loyal at a job was obsolete. You didn't do that because the company was looking at their bottom line. They weren't looking at this person, you know.
So we started becoming more selfish
Yes.
already, and it brewed and festered, and over time, and then 90s and social media and two-parent households not being as common, and all this added together, next thing you know, when COVID hits, it's not a creation of it, but more of a wake up to the problem.
Bingo. Yes, that's how I view it because the environment reflects us.
Now, do you find a lot of these couples then, because I've heard many stories where, you know, couples who worked that they were, you know, one working father, stay-at-home mom, or either or, but, like, even if it's just 2 corporate ones where they didn't spend a lot of time together. Well, now they have to spend all their time together, and I'm wondering if 2022 or 2023 had, like, the highest cases of divorces because when everybody was forced to be home, a lot of marriages realized, "Why am I married to you?"
You know, um, so I had my practice as a marriage coach during COVID, and I only closed my office for 2 weeks. And as long as I kept distance and they kept distance, we were able to continue to work because the couples wanted to come in person. Ironically enough, the people were not coming to me because they were on top of each other. They were coming to me because they wanted to know who they were with. So they were not, the only arguments that they would have was their interpretation of what COVID meant. Because some said it's a governmental conspiracy, and I don't have to wear a mask, and the partner wants to wear a mask. So the conflict was on how do we handle this? But my couples were not getting divorced. They were not interested in divorce. And I don't think divorce rates went up. It was only 4 years after that where the all back into the real world, or not the real world, back into now we're influenced by other people.
I saw something the other day that said that, most men will stay in toxic relationships because they don't listen to their friends. But most women will leave a good relationship because they do listen to their single friends. And so
There's
I'm
something
kind of
to be said.
looking at like, is it so you're saying is like we were actually better in relationships and marriages because of COVID, because we were spending time together in the house
Yes,
versus not having all the social interactions?
yes. Isn't that interesting? So I want you to go back to the COVID, okay? And, those pictures of people going on their balcony and throwing frisbees from one balcony to the next. They had to reach out. They had to connect. There was no choice. And they had to learn to accept something that they didn't want to accept. This is a hallmark of what it means to have a married mindset. A married mindset is to look at our partner, and even though they've got flaws, even though they have limitations, that we can say, I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to love you anyway. So all of the mindset during COVID was, we'll have to figure this out. We have no choice. It's like saying to the couple saying, divorce is not a choice here. COVID said going out into the public is not a choice here. And because it's not a choice, we have no choice to work it out, to figure out how to play games, to figure out how to have fun.
Now, when do you suspect that shifted even before COVID ever existed? Because I find that that was a thing of the previous generations. Like my parents had was a generation where it's you don't step out is like, "No, you're married to me, you're stuck with me, we're stuck into this together, we're gonna work it out." It's not quitting like, you got married, you're in it, you're not quitting. There's no like, why divorce rates started going up in the first place and when that was when they first started going. Because I know at some point, even, in the '90s, they were saying divorce rates like 40% back then. So it's like, when did that pivot start increasing where it became common to say, "You know what? This isn't working, I'm just gonna leave."
When divorce became an option and it was no longer a stigma. And then women could financially support themselves. So a lot of women would stay married because they're financially dependent on their husbands. And they wanted to raise their children. A lot of women don't want to stay home and raise their kids. They want to go to work. And so they have the option to go to work. And that working, like you said earlier, about the woman is talking or getting influenced by her friends. She's complaining about her husband, which women unfortunately do. I have a phrase: all women always complain all the time. That's why they're not powerful. A woman who complains is a woman who's stuck.
I feel it could be said for either gender though, because like, was always the thing. I'm a mathematical one, so I always looked at them like there's the problem and the solution side. You're on one or the other. So if you're always focused on the problem, that's the only side you'll be on. If you focus on the solution, then we can cross the bridge to get to the other side type thing.
You
Is-
know, it's funny, Mark. My mother in law used to have a saying to me. She would say, it's only a problem if you can't work on it. If you're working on the problem, there's no problem, only the effort to change things.
So our efforts shifted somewhere around the time of women's rights because people
Yes.
started realizing, well, why do I need him anyway? Because I don't need his money. I have a job. I can take care of the kids better than him anyway because he's never home. So, you know what? I'm just going to go on my own. And now it's no longer stigma. It's just, an option that's available.
Yes, I think the 60s and 70s when women were questioning why they were unhappy, they blamed their partner. They blamed him rather than what is it? Why am I unhappy? Like look internally. So it was I mean I was very much a part of that conversation back then. And when I reflect now after 70 years of when this woman sits in my office and I think 70 years ago, we fought for you being able to choose and you're still unhappy. What's going on?
What do you say to the women who still blame their spouse? And what would you say to the men who blame themselves for the failure of the relationship?
They're not talking to each other. They don't know who they're married to.
So everything comes back to that communication then. I always say this communication is key, really needs to be driven more.
And this particular kind of communication, Mark, a particular kind, a communication that reveals. Most communication comes across as blame, judge, and criticism. That's what happens. Okay. Our interpretation, we see our partner doing something and we interpret what they're doing. And that interpretation really comes from the model of their life. So I'll give you an example. A child who was raised in a war zone, they have an idea that the world isn't a safe place and certain noises mean certain things to them. They get adopted. They move into a safe neighborhood, safe family, and a car backfires and they hide under the bed. So their reality is such of what their world was made of. And they're not in what's real in front of them. It was a car backfiring. It wasn't a machine gun. It wasn't a gun going off. This is true about what I see all the time with couples. It's their interpretation of who they're married to, and it isn't who they're married to.
I mean, this goes into the whole mindset of it's conditioning. It's how do we condition our minds? So
A big
how can we recondition?
Okay, so that's the conversations that I create. Because the hardest thing to do, and I do this, like this is, I see my partner this way. And how I see my partner determines how I treat them. And I can only see what matches this. That's the other thing. I can only see what matches what I think is my reality. So that child can only see the world is not safe because that's their reality.
And so we have people in relationships where they can't see the partner that's because like we I've had relationships where they'll tell me, "Oh, well, we don't have enough in common." That's like so they're just seeing their definition of a relationship needs to be someone they share common interests with.
And that's okay. Then find someone that you have something in common with. If that's your the wisdom of your heart, like that's what I need. I need this kind of a person. Then honor that. I had this one client that her need was to be with someone that was very, very successful, financially successful, business driven, because she felt safer with that kind of a man. And when she was dating somebody that wasn't like that, she comes to me, she says, "This is a good guy. How come I can't love him? How come I can't connect with him?" Because that wasn't what her, I guess, your soul wanted. We need to listen to that. What's going to work for you, not to try to make it work just because we want them to like us. We go out with somebody, we want them to like us, but we don't stop and think, wait a second, am I being honest with who I need in my life?
And with myself.
Yes.
I
Yes.
remember a previous conversation we had that you mentioned that relationships aren't built on how much, two people both like golf or something, but
Right.
that it's based on their core values. So I look at like with a lot of the viewers of my show tend to be within that like 25 to 34 age range. So they're still kind of finding themselves. And it's this thing is it's like, well, how do you find yourself when because we've been taught so much throughout our childhood of either marriages don't work or long-term marriages based on what we see in our parents and grandparents. How do we now redefine like I find so many people are conditioned throughout their whole life with what everybody else sees as definement of life. Like how do we define it for ourselves on even knowing, well, what do I want in a marriage or in life or in myself?
So here's a little tip. So I tell people that I work with, on your first date, you're going to ask this person, who do you admire and why do you admire them? Okay. What they're going to reveal is what's important to them. And if you're not that, don't take a second date.
And then you have people who will try to change into that. What are you saying as far as with, when people start changing themselves for someone else?
Then that's a person who says, I need you to like me. And underneath that is, if I can get you to like me, then I could like me. It starts in the reverse. I like me. Here's me. And I find people who like the version of me that I like.
And I was speaking with, one person that, for a potential date, and I had asked them not that exact question, but I did say, like, "Well, what is it that you look at for husband material?" And she was hesitant to tell me because she's like, "Well, if I tell you you're gonna try to be that," I'm secure enough in who I am that I'm not gonna try to change how I am to fit whatever it is that you say. And she's like, "Well, then I'll tell you," because she's trusted. And it's like, but the fact that she was hesitant, I suspect is because there have been many men that when she told them what she wanted, that they started to change, like, it's like, "Oh, well, you want a guy who likes football? Oh, I love football." He doesn't really, but he's gonna say that because he wants to try to, be with her. And s
Did you ask her if that's what she does?
you know, if she changes what she is for what they want,
Yes. Because why? That's so interesting that she would. Because remember I said earlier, like, why do people ask that question? Why do they want to know that? Do you know every time a client says to me, I'm honest here, or I'm going to tell the truth. Do you know what I hear? Everything else was a lie, or they're trying to convince me on something.
because it's like,
People,
"Aren't you always honest?" I would hope. Yeah.
correct, but people reveal themselves by what they choose to say and what they choose to ask. They reveal themselves.
So are
So for
you on that first date, am I revealing myself then by asking the question, "Who do you admire?"
yes, yes, you're revealing yourself because it's like you're telling this person, I am looking for someone who is who values the things that I am. Yeah, you are revealing yourself.
I think that's the vulnerableness though, right? That we often don't wanna reveal our true selves because of the fear. Because that's like, you know, I feel like a lot of early dating is always lies, right? Because you're always trying to fit what the other person will say, "Hey, let's go for a second date," Like, I mean, even in the movie Hitch with Will Smith, the one guy's like, "I don't know if these shoes are really me." He's like, "Listen, you look good in the shoes. You bought the shoes. That's the you I'm talking about." It's like, but it's like,
Yeah, you're
uh,
touching something, Mark. Like we have different parts of ourselves, not that we're schizophrenic or anything, but we have different parts of ourselves. You know, like I'm working with somebody that one part of her doesn't want to be alone, but there's another part of her that wants to be independent. And so she flips back and forth with decision making on what she wants because one decision to be with somebody negates the other part of her that wants to be alone. It's quite a challenge.
then how does she find, herself or her partner if it's always the
She,
inner conflict?
if she were to acknowledge the fact that there's times that I want to be with somebody and there's times that I want to be alone, and to communicate that as a request,
So
like
being
something
with someone who understands her on that.
exactly, something you need to know about me. I really would like you to know this about me. Okay. And that is that you hit the nail on the head, Mark. That vulnerability makes for better relationships because it's more honest, it's more clear, and it allows us then to accept another person for who they are because they know who they are. To love somebody for who they are, not to love them for who they are for me. I need you to do this in order for me to feel good about myself. And that creates this codependent relationship that most people are in.
for me, I feel codependency is the game to strive for, but then I don't know, maybe that's the unhealthy thing. I feel like there's a balance, right? Like to
Yeah.
like we're social creatures, so to be completely dependent upon someone else is unhealthy. But to be completely independent and like no one else I need in life is also unhealthy. So I'm like, but people say, "Oh, if you're codependent, then that's not good." I'm like, "Well, I've seen my parents be married for going on somewhere around 50 years soon enough, and they leaned on each other." And I'm
Yes.
like, I think isn't that what we wanna strive for? Or maybe I'm wrong in relationships here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. That balance of being there for this other person. That's what I mean when I say married mindset. You're married now. You have another person to consider. Okay. You find a way to respect this person, to allow them to show up who they want to be, not who you want them to be, but how they want to be. Do not sacrifice who you are for another human being, but to teach this other human being to learn to love that I'm different than you and love me anyway. That was my favorite phrase in my marriage. Could you love me anyway? I might not do it the way you want me to do it, but could you love me anyway? I made a mistake. I lost my temper. I wasn't very kind to you with what I said, but could you love me anyway? I kind of like feel like I'm channeling Leo Biscaglia in a way, you know?
Well, you when you follow people certain enough, you do channel, and that's why people feel I channel Les Brown and Zig Ziglar, so, like, when you follow certain
Yeah,
it becomes
exactly.
influences. But I
Yeah.
think that goes into relationships too, where we start channeling our partners, that, you spend enough time with them, you start act that's why every right, how many times have your couples talked about how, like, "Oh, you act like your husband," or "You act like your wife." It's like, "What?" It's like, "Well, you've been with them 10 years." They start rubbing off on you.
Yeah. What about I look like my dog
Yeah, they
or my
look at you.
Yeah, exactly. But
See
you know why that happens, Mark, is our energy fields become intertwined. Our energy fields. And also we have something called a reticulating activated system in our brain that when we watch another person for a long period of time, we unconsciously take on their actions, their mannerisms, all of that. Okay.
Now, is that why breakups are so hard and difficult? Because as we were saying, Valentine's Day is gonna be around the time this episode's airing and everything, and the fact that a lot of people you mentioned break up the week before Valentine's Day, and
Right.
is the breakups the difficulty because of the fact that our energy fields get so intertwined, especially the
Yes.
longer we're with someone, that it's hard to like, okay, how do we untangle?
Yes, absolutely. So we go through this withdrawal thinking we miss this person, but really we miss who we are with this person. Like, where do we put that? Where do we put that part of us? And we talk about being alone. And here's my definition of feeling alone there's a judgment. When we judge something, we become prejudicial. And that is the feeling of separation, which is the feeling of being alone or the interpretation. I'm separate, I'm alone. This is why we can be alone and not feel alone because there's no judgment about being alone. Like I'm okay with being alone, so I don't feel alone.
Yeah. How do we so diving a little deep into things here is like then you know, how do we differentiate between, you know, I'm lonely and like, because if you're in a lonely mindset, you want to be with somebody, but it's like, do you want to be with that person because you love them, or you want to be with that person because you think it won't make you lonely anymore?
Oh,
Like,
Mark, that's so juicy what you just said. Do you know how many couples, when I ask them, why did you marry this person? What was going on in your life that you decided to marry? And I can't tell you how many times they'll say, I didn't want to be alone. This is not a healthy reason to be married to somebody. I didn't want to be alone. Because basically, what you're telling this other person is that you have to fix something that's the way that I feel. I need you to make sure that I never feel alone. That's your job. So I'm going to marry you and you're going to fulfill that for me. That's a huge ask. Because what ends up
Time it
happening
becomes resenting.
totally, because at some point, it's like, I wanna have my own life, I wanna breathe, but I always have to be there for you because you don't wanna be alone.
So I'm just thinking back on my relationships. I'm sure at some point I put that on people because like being so one, it's like I'm the youngest of the youngest. There's a decent age gap, but it's like so by the time I was high school age, I'm the only one. um, as far as the kids in the house kind of thing. And so now it's like, well, you grew up with brothers to play with in the house and video games and everything, not exactly having a lot of personal close friendships. So then leaning on intimate relationships or romantic relationships to be that person to be like, oh, well, then you'll be, the one that will be there all the time.
Yeah,
And I'm starting to realize like maybe that's why my high school girlfriend got too overwhelmed because it's like, because I leaned probably too much on her for that. So it's just like, like I said, you're definitely making me reflect on a lot of things here. So, like, anybody who watching, it's like, start thinking about all those past relationships and realizing, like, was it me that was part of the problem? Because I do share with even in leadership team building where, listen, when you team build and you have a problem with somebody, and then you have a problem with the next person, there's a problem with the next person. It's like, is it the other people or is it you? Because I understand that the common factor in all my failed relationships is me. Like, so I try to work on that.
and the other thing too, Mark, we talk like you use the phrase "failed relationships." What if and I talk in terms of if you don't plan on being married to this person, there's an expiration date in your relationship. It doesn't fail, it expires.
I think that's the thing for it then, right? Because like, how many of us are planning to have marriage and have that married mindset? Because it's
Right. Yeah, because we like we like to belong. We like that interaction. We're wired to be close to somebody. We're wired for that love, that feel good, that having somebody to call up and talk to and cuddle with, whatever. We love it. We love it. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. But the question is, am I ready to be married? Do I want to shift my thinking and become married mindset? Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. They don't. There are those that are like, I have no desire to become a millionaire. No problem. But if it's in their DNA to become a millionaire, and they might wake up when they're 55 years old and go, I'm ready to become a millionaire. Let's go for it. Or they're 19 years old and they're like, wake up and go, I want to be a millionaire. Let's go for it. So there are people who will wake up one day and go, I'm ready to be married. I'm
and so
ready.
you have that person and a person who's not in a
That-
relationship together.
That's a problem. Yeah. That's why that who do you admire and why is important to find out. So if they admire their mother who had 3 jobs and took care of the kids and did it all by themselves, and I'm somebody who wants to stay at home, well, guess what? They're not gonna admire me. They're gonna wonder why I am not as motivated as their mother who they admired. So I also have to be mindful of who do I admire? Do I admire somebody who works hard and makes a lot of money? And I go out with somebody who could care less about money. Well, I better not take a second date with them because I'm not going to like them.
I think it comes back down to that communication where it's how well are you communicating your wants, your need. Like, I want to get married. What do you want? I need you to be here for me because when I feel lonely, but I need you not to be here when I want to be independent. What do you need? And it's like, if we're not having those conversations, then it's kind of making more sense on why there's so many relationships that I say fail, you say expire. I look at it either which way, it's like, yeah, they're ending one way or another. And it's like,
Right. But sometimes they should end. Just because we go out with somebody or we're attracted to somebody does not mean that that's going to be our partner in life. It doesn't mean that. It just means that at the moment we find ourselves attracted to each other and we like each other and we want to spend time together. They're missing the courting. That's the dating. So we date each other. We see each other. We go out. We rely, whatever. But the courting is, I'm ready to be married. Are you ready to be married? Yeah. Let's see if we fit together. Let's see if we match what's important to us. That's the courting. And we've completely lost that idea, the courting part. Okay.
I remember there's something with C's where it was something like, that, compatibility is not the same as, um, connecting or something like that. I can't think of the proper words. It was 2 C's, but it was saying something like that just because you connect with somebody doesn't mean you're compatible with somebody.
Correct. Right. Which is why sometimes they'll say, I like you as my brother, or I feel like you're my sister. We're really compatible, but we're not connecting. This was so interesting. It was a research done on recognizing our partner by the DNA in your saliva, which is why kissing, like when you kiss somebody, like it's either there or it's not there, because we recognize the DNA in the saliva that that's our match.
So
Like
when
there's
we're
some,
looking at, "Oh, you're a really good kisser," it actually may be because 'cause you're making the good connection of things.
you could be a good kisser, but there's this when your toes curl kind of feeling like that. Like there's a recognition. There's also another recognition of your smell. They did a test on men wearing t-shirts and putting them in plastic bags and then women smelling them. And the t-shirt that made this woman go, "Oh, hello." And then they would meet the guy, they're like, "Absolutely, that's the guy." So we recognize our partner by the DNA, by the smell. We need to listen to those.
The pheromones for one, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Not
pretty
just
much
what watch they wear or what kind of shoes
right.
they wear, which that's what I grew up with. "Look at their watch. How expensive is it? Look at their shoes." It was like, like women were taught to go find a guy that could take care of them and make money and support them.
Well, I know we're going a little over time here, but I know, guys, there's gonna be a lot of value packed in this, and I appreciate your time, Kimberly. I do wanna go on one last subject to hear where it's the do you feel that the pheromones or that scent fades away over time in relationships? That and thus being the reason why drifting apart?
The, the scent is deeper than our mind. It's just something that we can't control. But our mind can override that part of us by judging this person and finding fault with them. The more we find fault with our partner, with whoever we're dating, the more we don't like them, the more we shut down. It's 10 o'clock. And so we can override that. And this is where we can kill any good feelings we have to this other person and leave a good relationship. And I think that that's what's been happening because divorce is an easy way to, I'm not getting what I want. I don't know how to get what I want, so I'm going to leave rather than communicate our wants and needs and work it out.
So, ideal suggestion would be if you're feeling those pheromones starting to fade or you're feeling you're judging your partner more and more and things just don't seem the same way they were in the beginning of the relationship, to call you and see if they can help work it out, with like to work with you so they can help possibly work out at least the communication factor to see, well, what is it that you do want? Like, do you want to stay together? Do you want to divide? Do you want, because like clearly you guys loved each other enough to be together for this long. So there was enough chemistry in the beginning. What happened?
Correct. Absolutely. So I have an 85% success rate in helping couples because most of the couples that come to me are like, I don't know if I want to be here, or we're fighting so much. And the fighting gets in the way of loving. and I teach them what's going on. And they're smart people. My clients are very smart people. They figure it out with the information I give them. Once they understand and they can communicate freely and honestly, they get it. They get it. And the other 15% decided, I don't want to even try. That's fine. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at like anyone watching this, you got a lot to think about, a lot to reflect on, hopefully in time for your next date. But at the very least, remember on that next date to ask that question, who do you admire? And for anything else, I look at them like I know you have your website, which I believe is just your name is the kimberlybrenner.com. So like, thank you for being a guest. And I'm hoping that whether a millionaire or not, or in the process of that, this helps you create a little bit better of a mindset, condition yourself for both love of yourself and love of whoever your partner may either be now or future. And we'll see you at the top and meet us next time on Condition for Success Mindset of a Millionaire.
Condition.